Can I interest anyone in some free vegetables? They're free. I picked them this morning, grown just a few miles from here. Awesome. Come on up. We've got some fresh tomatoes, some arugula, spicier than you ever tried it, kale, radishes. Here, you guys can take that and divvy it up. Don't forget the green beans, they're in there too. Awesome. Thank you. Enjoy. My name is Asha Walker, and I spent the last 5 years growing food and giving it away. Why would I do that? It's a good question. Well, I am an urban farmer. What is an urban farmer? That is another good question. We're going to cover that in just a little bit. I live in downtown Miami with my husband and my 14-year-old lab mix and my 18-year-old orange tabby cat. And I love to cook. Usually on Sundays, I'll comb through my saved recipes folder on Pinterest and draft my grocery list before I make my weekly pilgrimage to the market. Either Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, Publix usually. I hop in my car. First stop is always the produce section. I get my staple items, blueberries, spinach, kale. We tend to eat pretty healthy in my house. And I take home my fresh items, and most nights I throw down in my kitchen. Okay, would you please raise your hand if that sounds like a familiar scenario for you or for someone in your household? Okay, great. So that's most hands in the room. I'm now going to ask you to imagine a different scenario. What if this was the only grocery store in your neighborhood? What if you didn't have a car? And what if your only options for groceries lived on a shelf for years before they ever made it into your cabinets? Well, then you might be one of the 23 million Americans who live in a food desert. This country has a dark secret. It lies within our food system, and it is rooted in inequality. If you live in a food desert, eating fresh foods is next to impossible. So what is a food desert? Good question. The USDA designates food deserts as areas of low income with little to no access to fresh foods within a mile. So there's no grocery stores. And what they do have are corner stores and bodegas. They're these sort of glorified gas station supermarkets, as I call them. And they're stocked, floor to ceiling usually, with highly processed foods. And these foods have been proven over and over again to be linked to chronic diseases like diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, obesity. And now these diseases have a few things in common. They are oftentimes preventable, they're diet-related, and they are plaguing low-income communities. The largest number of heart disease-related deaths were people who ate too many processed meats and drank too many sugary drinks. People at the highest risk of stroke, too much salt. Almost half of the deaths caused in 1 year by type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and stroke were diet-related. So how did we get here? When did we sort of give up our rights to healthy eating? Well, food deserts, for one, are caused by a number of factors. Economic flux dictates where major grocery chains are located, and oftentimes low-income neighborhoods just don't make the cut. So then that leaves people in food deserts with two options: fast food or highly processed corner store foods, both high in salt, fat, and sugar. So we've got less disposable income coupled with a lack of transportation and no fresh food for miles, and we have millions of people dying from preventable diseases a year. We know unhealthy foods because there is a powerful and lucrative marketing machine working around the clock to make sure that we do. It's making sure that we're inundated with unhealthy options. And people who live in food deserts are the most susceptible to these options because they are readily available in their communities. So what does that look like on the ground? It looks like families that are stuffed but starving. They're stuffed because they've consumed highly caloric meals. They're starving because those meals contain little to no nutrients and instead are packed with sugar and sodium and dangerous preservatives. If you live in a food desert, your priority is the price tag, not the ingredient label. So then this ends up on your dinner table because spinach is expensive, it's not in your neighborhood, and you don't know the effects that processed foods have on your entire life. Today, your zip code has a greater effect on your health than your genetic code. Food deserts are an issue of food injustice and a broken food system. Insurmountable, right? I mean, this is just too big of an issue. There's no way that we could possibly address food insecurity, poverty, and a severe lack of information, and there is just no way that we could do it all at the same time. Or is there? Sustainable urban agriculture. It is a long way of saying growing our own food forever. In 2013, I started a community gardening not-for-profit. It's called Health in the Hood. A lot of people like that name. We built our first urban vegetable farm in Liberty City. It's a sprawling South Florida food desert neighborhood, and it's best known for drug wars and drive-bys and almost no fresh foods. We applied for a few more grants, and we continue to expand our network of urban farms. And today, we have 8 vegetable gardens, and we've given away over 6,000 pounds of free fruits and vegetables to families in food deserts. There are some really important key components to our model. The first is land, which there is an abundance of in low-income neighborhoods. So the land that we grow on is all donated. It's either donated by churches or schools or municipalities or community partners, and it's all residentially located so that people can walk outside their front doors and be inside of their vegetable gardens. The lots that we work on are breeding grounds for trash and crime, and they completely deplete the morale of the communities around them. That is until we get there and we change the landscape. The next piece of our puzzle are our community partners. So we work very closely with our partners to make sure that we're building strong connections in the communities that we work in. So we knock on doors, we canvass neighborhoods, we meet people, we find out what people are interested in having growing in their gardens, and we share our goals for community health. I think I realized how important this step was to the work when we started our community outreach in Overtown. And let's be clear, by community outreach, I mean me and my dog knocking on doors and handing out flyers. That's sort of our community outreach for the moment. So one afternoon, I knocked on a woman's door, and she answered, begrudgingly at first. Hi, I said, I'm Asha. We're going to be building a vegetable garden just around the corner from you. Is there anything in particular that you'd like us to grow? Anything you'd like to cook? Can you grow okra? Can I grow okra? I've got your okra. She smiled, she opened the door all the way, she took the flyer. I then asked her if she would mind taking a few extra flyers and sharing them with her neighbors. She looked at me as if I had 2 heads, and she said, "Are you crazy? I don't walk around here." It was then I realized just how important this step was to our work. Gardens have a unique way of breaking down barriers and uniting people. And this particularly rough patch of Overtown wasn't going to deter us from building a vegetable garden and bringing people together. And so that's just what we did. So once we've met the neighbors and prepped the land, then we get growing. Planting supplies are delivered. Hundreds, sometimes 1,000 cinder blocks are delivered and placed into beautiful vegetable planters. Truckloads of soil are dumped. Kids love this part. And people are naturally intrigued and drawn to the opportunity to get their hands dirty and to grow their own foods. I think he probably thought he was doing it himself. We start to meet people who have a green thumb, and we hire residents from each neighborhood to maintain the gardens. People always ask us, how do you keep your garden so healthy? We hire incredibly dedicated people who help us care for the gardens every day. We rely on our incredibly dedicated volunteers who bring it all together, working hand in hand with the community. And even our tiniest volunteers pitch in sometimes. Planting supplies become vegetable beds, and what was a desolate space is now transformed into a vibrant vegetable garden. So once the gardens are planted and they're growing, they then become our living classrooms. So we're hosting interactive, high energy, of course, nutrition, fitness, and urban farming workshops. And we're talking to kids about how to read the back of an ingredient label. Some kids have never turned over the back of a Cheez-It or a chip or a hot fry, the bane of my existence, hot fries. We're talking about healthy cooking demonstrations. We're showing kids healthy ways to prepare foods that they're familiar with. Where we teach kids about real versus processed foods. This is one of our exercise obstacle courses. And some days we just plant green beans. Our gardens are beautifying, educating, creating jobs, and feeding communities. But we didn't stop there. Welcome to the Health in the Hood Mobile Farmers Market. Our mobile farmers market allows us to connect all of our gardens. It is a game changer in how we are able to distribute our produce in the community. So kids are able to hop on board our interactive and educational mobile vegetable pantry and pick out their fresh veggies. This was the first day that we got it. There is a whole story behind that. That's another TEDx talk. And that is me. I did not grow up in a food desert. I didn't know that the vegetables on my plate at night were a luxury for kids who live just a few miles from me, but who did live in a food desert. This is Gabby. Gabby is growing up in a food desert. And Gabby could be part of a first generation that would experience a shorter lifespan than her parents simply because of the foods that she eats. But fortunately, there is a Health in the Hood garden in Gabby's neighborhood. This is Gabby and her kale. When kids grow their own vegetables, instant connections to their food sources are made. When parents can walk outside their front doors and pick fresh foods for dinner, healthy eating becomes easier. And when families start to understand the dangers of processed foods, healthier habits are adopted. By connecting communities back to the land, we are empowering people. And we're giving people the opportunity to create their own realities, healthier realities. So where do we go from here? How do you use urban agriculture in your life? Well, the first thing I would say is I would challenge you to start thinking about food access differently. So rather than a deficit, maybe that vacant lot or that rooftop or that wall, hydroponic farming, or even your front yard are actually a community asset. If just 5% of people who lived in food deserts had access to fresh foods, we could prevent 3,000 premature deaths a year. You know, it wasn't so long ago that localized farming and victory gardens were our way of life. I think that growing our own foods is one of the most peacefully disruptive things that we can do. And so I say let's plant seeds. Let's plant seeds everywhere that we can. Seeds that will feed communities, and seeds that will embed the very solution into the fabric of society so that people can feel it, experience it, and eat it. The future of food is local, and we already have all the tools that we need to make that happen. So, let's get growing. Thank you.